Have you ever been terrified to start because you were always told you were born to finish first? Have you ever sat in silence with your dreams curled tightly inside your chest, not because you don't care enough, but because you care too much? Because deep down, you suspect that trying and failing would shatter something sacred that people once believed about you? I know, you were the bright one, the gifted one, the one they pointed at when they needed hope, or proof, or pride. The one whose worth was measured in gold stars and stunned faces. You were the child who made grown-ups feel like the world was okay again. You were called exceptional long before you had a chance to understand what it meant to be enough. So you learned to survive in applause. And now, when it's quiet, you don't know who you are. Because no one told you this. When your identity is built on being special, trying becomes a threat. Trying means risking that maybe you're not who they said you were. That maybe the magic wasn't real. That maybe you were just good at pleasing people. And no one taught you how to live without being impressive. So now, even the things you love make you anxious. Even the things you dream of feel heavy. Because the voice in your head whispers, what if I'm not actually good enough? What if they were wrong about me? Or worse, what if they were right, and I just lost it along the way? And so you wait. Not because you're lazy, but because you're protecting something precious, the version of you that people admired. You defend it like a shrine. Because trying would mean confronting the possibility that the best thing people saw in you might not survive the test of time. So you procrastinate, you perfect, you plan endlessly, you create in your mind a masterpiece that no one can criticize because it only exists in your mind. And the world sees hesitation, but you know it's deeper than that. It's fear disguised as logic. It's grief masked as ambition. It's the quiet terror of falling short in front of the people who once thought you were extraordinary. But can I tell you something? That fear you carry, it makes sense. Because when we're praised for being special, we aren't taught how to be real. When we're celebrated for being ahead, we're not allowed to slow down. When we're admired for talent, we're not prepared for effort. And somewhere along the way, your worth became tied to being exceptional, not human. But you are human. You always were. You just learned to hide the soft, unsure parts. The clumsy parts. The parts that don't shine right away. And now, those are the very parts you need to move forward. But it's hard, isn't it? Because your inner child still thinks love is performance. Because the first time you showed your sadness, someone said, "But you're so smart." The first time you struggled, they looked confused. And the first time you needed help, they hesitated. So you learned to hide the need. To keep the questions to yourself. To trade confusion for competence. To earn love instead of receiving it. And every time someone said, "You're going to change the world," it felt more like a contract than a compliment. You were too young to understand that their dreams for you were not your responsibility. You were too kind to reject the pedestal. So you stood there, frozen in the spotlight, while your real self, your scared, beautiful, growing self, hid behind the curtain. But you're not a statue. You're not a trophy. You're not a promise someone else made to the world. You are a person, and people are allowed to change, to fail, to begin again, to want things without being great at them, to try without needing to prove anything. But when you've been praised for being special, trying feels like betrayal. It feels like peeling off the armor of genius. It feels like letting go of the identity that kept you safe. Because as long as you don't try, you can't be proven ordinary. And that is the deepest fear of all. That being ordinary might mean being unworthy. But here's the quiet truth you were never told. Your worth never lived in their praise. It never lived in your grades, your gifts, your test scores, your performances. It lives in your trying, in your choosing, in your trembling steps forward even when you feel like you're about to disappoint everyone who ever believed in you. Because that's where your real courage is. Not in your perfection, but in your permission to be fully, gloriously human. I know it's hard to believe. Because no one ever celebrated your mess. No one ever clapped for your confusion. No one gave you a medal for trying something you weren't immediately good at. But healing begins where performance ends. When you stop auditioning for the love you already deserve. When you stop protecting an image and start protecting your soul. And I know, sometimes you miss the version of you who made people proud. But maybe that version was just a mirror. A reflection of what they wanted to see. Not a whole person. Not the full you. Because the full you is scared sometimes. She doubts herself. He overthinks. They procrastinate. You cry at night for reasons that make no sense to anyone else. And that's okay. Because that means you're real. And real is more sacred than special. Real is more healing than praise. Real is more human than the pedestal could ever allow. So, what if you try? What if you do the thing badly? What if you write the story and it's not genius? What if you paint the picture and it's just okay? What if you say the truth and it cracks your voice? What if you show up without needing to be impressive? What if that is the first real step to freedom? You don't need to be spectacular to be enough. You don't need to live up to the image others built for you. You don't need to fear trying, just because trying means you might finally be seen as human. You already are, and that's not a fall from grace. That's the beginning of grace. Because maybe the point was never to be a star. Maybe the point was to be a sky, wide, open, honest, and no one claps for the sky. But it holds everything. Your story, your sorrow, your joy, your beginning. And beginnings don't need applause. They just need you. Quiet, brave, tired, hopeful, still here, still trying, still enough, always enough. If this resonated, you're not alone. Let me know what part felt real to you. And maybe that's the part no one ever told you. That being special was never about being above others. It was about the light you carried. The way you noticed things others didn't. The way your heart burned a little brighter. Even when you didn't have the words for why. But somewhere, that light became performance. It became pressure. It became the fear of dimming. Of fading. Of being seen as just another person on the ground, not the glowing promise in someone else's eyes. So you dimmed yourself to stay safe. To stay in control. Because if you never lit the flame again, no one could accuse you of going out. But love, real love, isn't afraid of your shadow. And worth isn't a flame that burns out when you rest. You were not born to be brilliant. You were born to be whole. That means sometimes radiant, and sometimes wrecked, sometimes flowing, and sometimes frozen, sometimes certain, and sometimes lost. All of you belongs. Even the you who can't get out of bed. Even the you who scrolls through job listings and closes them just as fast. Even the you who writes a single line and deletes it in shame. Even the you who wonders, what if I'm not that person anymore? Especially that you. Because grief lives there. Not just grief for who you were, but grief for who you had to pretend to be. For the childhood you spent living up to dreams that weren't your own. For the love you were scared to lose if you ever looked unsure. That grief is sacred. It's not weakness. It's memory. It's the echo of every time you were clapped for being something. But not comforted for being someone. And now, you are starting to feel it. The ache of longing not to be praised, but to be understood. Not to be admired, but to be met. Not to be exceptional, but to be real. That ache is not the end. It's the start. The start of you learning how to live outside the mirror. Outside the audience. Outside the need to impress. It's the beginning of a life that doesn't depend on applause to feel alive. But it's terrifying, isn't it? Because if you're not the special one, who are you? That question will break you open. But maybe that's the gift. To finally find out who you are when no one is watching. To finally speak words that haven't been rehearsed. To finally live days that aren't designed for someone else's pride. To finally be okay with failing at something, because you're finally free to love it. Even if it doesn't love you back. Even if it's messy. Even if no one understands why. Because this time, you're not performing. You're becoming. And becoming is not tidy. It's not always noble. It's not something people cheer for. It's something you do alone. In quiet moments. When the world stops looking, and you start listening. Listening to the part of you that's been waiting behind the curtain. The part of you that was never allowed to be just you. Scared and stuttering. Messy and magical. Real. Do you hear it? That tiny voice. Just under the fear? It doesn't shout. It whispers. Maybe we don't have to prove anything anymore. Maybe we're allowed to begin. Maybe it's time. You don't need to burn yourself out just to stay bright. You don't need to be extraordinary to be worthy of love. You don't need to know where this path leads. You just need to take one honest step. Not to impress. Not to prove. Just to feel your feet on the ground. just to be here, just to be you. And when you take that step, however small, however shaky, you are not falling from grace. You are falling into it. Because the truth is, your specialness was never in your talent. It was in your tenderness. The way you feel deeply. The way you care even when it hurts. The way you keep showing up, even in silence. That is the part no one saw. Because they were too focused on your light to notice your flame. But now, you get to see it. And that is the beginning of home. A home not built in praise. Not built in performance. But built in presence. In breath. In your heartbeat against the hush of your own soul. Welcome back. You didn't lose your magic. You just stopped performing it. And now, you get to live it. Softly, slowly, honestly. You're allowed to start again. Not because you owe it to anyone. But because this time, it's for you. And that is more than enough. If this touched something inside you, you're not alone. Let me know what part felt real to you. And when you do start again, not for the gold stars, not for the admiration, but for the quiet pull inside your chest that says, this matters to me, you will feel everything at once. Terror, relief, shame, hope, like someone who's been underwater so long they forgot what breath was supposed to feel like. You may tremble, you may cry, not because you're weak, but because trying without the shield of perfection is the most courageous thing a soul can do. It means walking into the light without your mask. It means letting your real self be seen. Not the genius, not the golden child, not the miracle they raised their glass to. Just the human, the heart, the hands that still shake, the voice that still doubts, and still tries. That's the thing no one warned you about. That when you stop performing, it might feel like a death. A death of your old identity. A death of their expectations. A death of who you thought you had to be loved. And in a way, it is. But it's the kind of death that makes space for something softer. Something truer. The you who doesn't flinch when they're not the best in the room. The you who can sit beside others in their mess because you've made peace with your own. The you who isn't waiting to be exceptional anymore, because you're already real. And that's rarer than special. That's sacred. And maybe, just maybe, the thing you thought you needed to protect, your reputation, your talent, your shine, was never the point. Maybe the point was to come home to your soul. To trust your voice before anyone else does. To believe in the beauty of effort, not just excellence. Because when you were a child and they called you gifted, they only saw the part that bloomed early. But there is a whole forest inside you they never explored. A wilderness of becoming, of breaking and rebuilding, of forgetting and remembering, of failing and trying again, not for glory, but for growth. You were never meant to peak in your childhood. You were meant to evolve, to stretch, to fall apart and come back softer, wiser, more whole. But that evolution takes a kind of bravery that never gets trophies. Because it's quiet, invisible, messy, unpredictable, and it belongs only to you. No one sees the days you sat in front of a blank page and didn't write. But stayed anyway. No one applauds the moment you finally said, I don't have to be perfect to be valuable. No one throws a party when you choose healing over hustling. But those are the victories that matter. Because they are not about performance. They are about peace. And if you're still afraid to try, that's okay. Fear doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're aware. It means something inside you knows how much this matters. But what if you could hold that fear and move anyway? What if you didn't wait to be fearless? What if you let yourself be clumsy, uncertain, unready, and still begin? You don't need to leap. You just need to lean. Lean toward what lights you up. Lean toward the whisper, not the roar. Lean into the softest part of yourself and say, I will not abandon you this time. You are not here to live up to anyone's mythology. You are here to live. To touch the world with your honesty. To leave behind not a legend, but a life. A real, raw, messy, beautiful life. One that doesn't need to be remembered as brilliant to be worth living. One that simply felt real while it lasted. And that is more than special. That is sacred. So if you're holding your breath, waiting to be ready, you already are. Not because you know what you're doing, but because you know who you are no longer willing to be. You're not here to impress. You're here to express. Not to rise above the world, but to return to it. As yourself. Finally. Fully. Without the armor. Without the mask. With your heart out in the open and your hands a little shaky. But your eyes, clear. Because for the first time, you're not looking for approval. You're looking for truth, and you've just begun to find it. If this journey feels like yours, say something below. You are not strange for feeling this way. You are finally becoming real. And maybe that's the most profound becoming of all. Not rising higher, not winning more, not dazzling crowds or dominating rooms, but sitting in the quiet and saying to yourself, I still want this, even if no one claps. That is the courage they never taught you. The kind that doesn't come from being exceptional, but from being willing to be seen without your performance. The kind that says, I will keep writing even if no one reads it. I will keep singing even if my voice cracks. I will keep building, shaping, trying, even if I am never crowned the best. Because trying is no longer about arriving. It's about reclaiming. Reclaiming your voice from the silence of shame. Reclaiming your creativity from the prison of perfection. Reclaiming your worth from the hands of people who only loved your highlight reel. And if no one ever told you this before, let me say it now. You are not a disappointment just because you are still unfolding. You are not broken because your path doesn't look like the prophecy they cast over you. You are not failing just because you paused, or changed, or doubted, or dared to rest. You are not falling behind. You are finally walking your own way. And it might be slower. It might be lonelier. It might not impress anyone from the outside. But from the inside, it feels like breathing again. Like coming home to a body that no longer needs to hustle for love. Like waking up from the trance of always having to be on. Like meeting yourself not as a project, but as a person. And this is where real growth begins. In the dark soil of self-compassion. In the quiet undoing of old stories. In the brave, ordinary moments where you stop chasing applause and start choosing peace. Let them think you've changed. Let them wonder why you're not shining the same way you used to. Let them misunderstand what it means to finally put the mirror down. Because you don't owe them your performance. You don't owe them your shine. You don't owe them the version of you they decided was special. What you owe is something gentler. Something truer. A quiet promise to the part of you that waited for years behind the mask. I see you now, and I won't hide you anymore. Because the most healing thing you'll ever do is not chasing your old self, but choosing your real one. Not proving your worth, but remembering it. Not rising to meet their expectations, but sinking deeper into your own truth. And sometimes, that truth whispers things like, I'm tired, I'm scared, I need more time, I want something different now. Let it all speak. Even the parts of you that aren't ready. Even the parts that wish you could just go back to being easy to love. You're not here to be easy to love. You're here to be honest. And honesty will always be the slower road. The messier one. The one with fewer fans and more freedom. But it's the road where you get to keep your soul. Where you get to build something that actually feels like you. Not just the you they applauded, but the you who cries at night and wakes up still trying. Still reaching. Still hoping. Still here. That is your quiet miracle. Not the gift they saw in you, but the grace you're now giving yourself. So if no one else says it, let me be the one. You are still worthy, even now, especially now, even when you're afraid to try, even when you only take one trembling step forward, even when it's been years since you felt like yourself. You are still here, and that is enough to begin. Again, and again, and again. If these words held a mirror to your heart, let them land, and if you feel ready, share the part that touched you most. I'll be listening. And here's something else no one told you. You don't have to be brave alone. The weight you've carried, the pressure to live up to a story you never wrote, the ache of wondering if your best years are behind you. Those aren't just your burdens. They're echoes from generations. Wounds passed down silently through praise and performance. Parents who only knew how to love through achievement. Teachers who rewarded obedience over curiosity. A world that claps for the prodigy, but forgets the person. You didn't choose this story, but you are allowed to rewrite it. And rewriting doesn't mean tearing it all down. It means letting go of the parts that don't feel like love. The parts that made you afraid to fall. The parts that convinced you being ordinary is something to fear. Because ordinary isn't a curse. Ordinary is the soil where wonder grows. It's the quiet morning when you create just for yourself. It's the deep breath before you begin again, not to be amazing, but to be alive. And the people who only loved you when you were winning? They were never loving you. They were loving what you gave them. Their pride, their proof, their fantasy. But the people who will stay, who will sit with you in the doubt, in the mess, in the unglamorous middle, those are the ones who see you. Not the child prodigy, not the performer, not the legend in the making. Just you. That is sacred love. And it begins with you. When you choose yourself without the condition of excellence. When you allow your worth to exist in the trying, not the triumph. When you say, I'm done living for the idea they had of me. I want to meet the person I actually am. That's not rebellion. That's healing. That's reclaiming your life from the grip of a performance you never auditioned for. Because what if your most beautiful self isn't the one they remember? What if it's the one you're still discovering? The one who stumbles, who starts over at 30, who changes their mind at 40, who fails spectacularly at 50 and laughs for the first time without shame. The one who is real. There is no award for that. No certificate for unbecoming the golden child. No standing ovation for choosing rest, honesty, or tenderness over being remarkable. But there is freedom. There is breath. There is the soft, warm knowing that you no longer have to earn your right to exist. That's the gift. Not being special, but being home, with yourself. And now, maybe you're ready. Not for the world to see you rise, but for you to see yourself clearly, for the very first time. You don't need to impress anymore. You don't need to sparkle to be seen. You don't need to prove your old self was real. The fact that you're still here, still hoping, still holding the fragments of a story you're just beginning to write. That's enough. That's always been enough. And now, it's time to begin. Quietly, bravely, honestly, from here.